Okay, Jeremy. So we've got the context of the problem statement that's out there. Once again, just reiterating, we're not talking about one big beautiful bill, but just basically the thought processes that go behind it.
Mm-hmm.
So the big thing for me to try and get behind the scenes in the thinking is all about the sort of context and pressure that you put under, in these sorts of situations. Is it just being business as usual, or are you finding that this added sort of dimension is, let's say, over and above what you would normally expect?
It definitely has increased, right? The pressure has increased. I'd say the visibility and transparency desired of what you're doing and how you're impacting costs and how you can partner is increasing. So
Right.
I think that's happening. So from that aspect, yeah, there's growing pressure. I'd say the other dynamic of the pressure is we're at a point where the old ways of whatever we used to do, right, was the traditional things that you would do to save money. It's not enough to make up for the problem statement that we had earlier. It isn't going to be enough to do that. So we have to start thinking more innovatively. So thinking through tackling things you didn't tackle before, but in categories you weren't at before, having discussions you didn't have before. How do you measure data in different ways to make meaningful, help inform better decisions, all those kinds of things. How do we rethink how the game that we're playing and how we're playing it, because the way we were isn't gonna meet the task.
So it's interesting, though. Okay, I'm not going to put you,
Yeah.
well, I am putting you under pressure. It's meant to be a real sort of, thought process behind it. Does that mean in the past that you've really allowed yourself to coast a bit because, every month we're going to do the same sort of thing? Yes, we got this target that's actually here. The innovation, yes, you thought about innovation because, you guys are doing some really innovative stuff before this actually happened. But has there been an accelerator with regards to
Yeah, I wouldn't say that it's coasting. I would say that you kind of tapped all the stuff that you've and you can keep making incremental progress, right, on some of those things.
Yeah.
Now you have to start making decisions in a different way, like what I was talking about earlier, which is what's really that overall value of why we're doing something, how can it generate revenue, how do we prioritize those things and only do those things because we have a set amount of money we're going to spend, right? Thinking that way is a different way of thinking than just I'm trying to reduce my costs, right? So it's starting to frame up how we prioritize things, think through things differently. So I guess that would be how I would describe it. Like, I don't necessarily, and because of the pressure, we have to keep finding things, but going back to the same wells over and over isn't going to do it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Because I must admit, when these new constraints come, you got to start to actually make those decisions. And you already said that, right? That you got to think a little bit differently.
Yeah.
So what is the things that you're thinking about differently that, let's say, trying to accelerate, like you say, I can't keep on going to the same well.
Yeah.
Or, okay, the other thought process, yes, you can go to the same well.
Just in a different way.
But doing it a different way.
Yeah, that's very true. A little bit of both. I would say one of the things that we're trying to do is increase transparency and accountability across the organization for all of the leaders in the organization to participate in that, not like how are you working with the doctors to save money, but it's more of here's the spend by VP, for example. Here's the savings initiatives that we're partnering with them on. Here's things that they're willing to forego to help. Like they plan this in the budget, they're not going to do that, for example, because of constraints and the value isn't there anymore. And making that all transparent to the organization, not even for supply chain taking credit always, but for doing the math and saying this is where we're on the path to.
Do I look at that as being a little bit of a witch hunt with regards to...
I wouldn't say a witch hunt. It's the same kind of concepts that we've been doing with like doctors, right? Like show doctors their cost per case versus each other. It is, I see it as an accountability. And you do have to put in context of, hey, certain executives have more spend because their portfolio needs to have more spend.
Right.
But they also need to be working and pressuring their teams to work to identify ways to reduce that down to a level, right? So it's it's trying to get that more engagement, more transparency, and having those discussions. Like, yes, sometimes it could be turned a witch hunt, but you should be having that discussion of like, hey, I can't do anything here, and here's why. There's a good business justification. It's fine, but having those discussions.
But are you are you separating that sort of that decision-making process with regards to capital projects versus operational? Because you only have one team, and you're spread across multiple different areas. Is there changes of opinion of how to actually prioritize what goes?
It is a little bit. It's changing how we prioritize what we're working on, right? And trying to identify the things that have the most value and working on those first, because you can't do everything at once.
Yep.
And so it is doing a little bit of that, but it's also rearranging how we think and how we use our data, making our data, even some of the stuff we talked about. How do we use automation and tools to do things for us so that we very quickly have data in a way that's meaningful, almost real time all the time, so we're not having to do that work. We're out there doing the work and having the discussions, and the data will kind of handles itself as much as possible. So doing more of that, because we don't have time to do all that stuff, and we need to have the meaningful conversations and decision making. That's what we need to do.
Yeah. So what would be real life examples of what programs of work, well, let's say, scheduled to actually move forward, but then all of a sudden you thought, oh, okay, really, there's the juice worth the squeeze. We actually need to actually hunt bigger.
Yeah. I'll give you an example. Like, one of the things that came up, and this isn't even, it's through this kind of thinking, right, and these kinds of discussions. We have our IT department, of course, they're doing all kinds of projects, right? They always have projects going on.
Of course, IT always does.
Yeah, they always do, right? Upgrades to our medical record, upgrades to different things, right? So that's going on. But they obviously have a project management tool. They have one that's, the Ferrari of them, right?
Yeah.
They weren't utilizing all the features of that. And then when you start having this discussion, instead of just talking about how do we reduce the cost of the Ferrari, it's like, do we even need a Ferrari, or do we just need a nice Toyota Corolla? And the decision was like, we could do just fine with the Corolla, because that's meeting what actually needs, because we don't use all these aspects of the Ferrari. And that's a way different value proposition than just taking a few dollars off the Ferrari, because that's a whole different ballgame. So things like that, we're having those kinds of discussions.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Thank you. Done. So you've got now the context of the conversation, the topic of what we're doing. So the key question around trying to understand more of the thinking is the context and pressure that you're actually under with, let's say, these new changes. Can you describe anything that has actually really changed, inside your organization, once, you found out that all of a sudden the savings target has actually gone up because of this?
Yeah, I think it's just, to be honest, it's more of the same, but with a higher goal. So the higher goal forces you to be more resourceful. It forces you to think more outside the box, which is why looking to partner with different leaders differently, looking to gain efficiencies. Again, we can only go after the same category so many times. A lot more conversation, a lot more transparent conversations with our physicians, key leaders, lowering cost of care, the impact to insurance, the impact on the patient bill. Those are all variables that we're talking about now.
Right.
Yeah. But the goal is higher. So I think one of the things that you've and I chatted on before is, how do I expand my team's capability and output to deliver value? How much of it is going to be my team? How much of it is going to be via partnerships? What can we tackle internally versus, what do we outsource, and not outsource a department, but outsource a function or a specialization. So that's where my head goes.
Yeah. So when you look at those hard constraints, when you're going through that decision-making process, investments, labor, training, something drops or something's actually got to give.
The trade-off.
Yeah. Do you see that?
I do. I think.
And how do you get to that point of saying, okay, what do I trade off?
I know. I think for me, it's expertise, right? So and that's hard. Where do we want to invest our internal human capital, right? What are we good at? What can we maximize? And then if there's a category that where we don't have the specialization, do we want to partner with someone to tackle that? And I think that's where it's at for me. So the trade-off there is, do I want to keep growing a team? Potentially in certain aspects, but I would say I'd rather partner on cleaner data and better procurement, business intelligence. I think that's key. The different levers you can pull and indirect spend where we don't have visibility. I think there's a ton of value, unlocked value there. And I think we touched on it last time. You know, how specialized can your team get in a $300 million spend bucket that includes different purchase services that are completely different, IT down to storage, et cetera, office supplies. I think we need to start partnering more. I think we need to delegate more. I think we need to trust third parties to help us out, because I don't think we can do it all internally. You know, we're healthcare. Our specialty should be healthcare patients, right, or patient-driven products. Again, why I think we do pretty good in the med surg space. I think the rest we can probably think about a different strategy.
Yeah. So do you actually have, let's say, those constraints that are actually in front of you with regards to operations versus capital projects? You know, which ones am I actually going to allocate first my resources to? Because, you know, business goes on. As it stands, the pressure could be I could save more money on a product versus, let's say, more money on a capital project. What am I actually going to support? Yeah,
and I think that's a great question, because I think with capital, you want to be fiscally responsible. You want to, you know, if I can buy a $2 million MRI for 1.8, like that's real value, right? You want to maximize that as much as possible. But yeah, that's a good question, because I think right now when I think about my team, which I have a great team, we are going to focus in med surg, procedural, so OR, implants, and then capital. When I think about my indirect team and where they're adding the most value, it's capital. And it's not services. The services pipeline is pretty, I would say, on a thinner side.
Right.
And I think that makes sense. You know, the organization wants to invest in itself. We're going to need to invest in strategy, routine capital. Our physicians are asking for more technology. So we're exerting a lot of energy with capital, and we're doing a good job.
And when you say that physicians asking more in technology, more equipment to actually support them to do their jobs.
Absolutely.
So the capital budget's actually increasing from that viewpoint. Obviously, the revenue is not increasing; just the costs are increasing.
Yeah, you know.
So what are the trade-offs from that viewpoint?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, because I think that now becomes part of the conversation. So when we're working with a physician to negotiate better implant costs, we can talk about capital, right? So capital becomes a conversation that you know, how can we save money on the operating side so we can reinvest in capital? That now becomes a real conversation. You know, the other lever that I feel like it's newer for me, and it could change by geography or market. The other thing I'm hearing physicians bring up more recently is actually labor.
Right.
They don't feel they have enough support to do the amount of volume they want to get done.
Right.
So it's a combination of capital and then clinical support.
Right.
Is what I'm hearing recently. And I'd be curious to see if other people are seeing the same thing.
Yeah, well, you know, that's always been one of the key things, isn't it? You know, like I say, clinical support inside the operations is, yes, great to actually have the physicians, but if you don't actually have anything else there, you know, you're only as good as, you know, the nurse that's actually standing next to you.
Yeah, and it sticks out to me. I've heard that actually a few times in the last 3 months, and I don't recall that prior. And you know, I know that recruitment is a challenge across the industry. And I wonder if that's a new constraint or a newer constraint, or if it's been magnified recently, which is a whole different strategy. You know, how do you manage that? How do you improve that? And I'm sure there's going to be a place for that, or a solution for that with technology, AI, automation. But that's a barrier.
Yeah. So more pressure, let's say from the top down, and then how does that actually pass out to the team? Do you hide that?
Repeat that question, or rephrase it.
Effectively, the context and the pressure of what's actually happening in today's environment, and you know, the bigger savings targets that are there. How do you actually, let's say, protect your team? You know, to make sure that they're going to support this.
You know, I don't know if it's protecting the team. I think everyone, again, I feel like those conversations are positive. People are very transparent. People understand we're under new pressures. I think it's a conversation around what can we hit realistically. What's the target you can hit realistically here? And I think that's where we go. I mean, we had 2 strategic conversations last week with physicians, and I thought those conversations were very positive.
Right. I'll just end with just this one statement.
Sure.
Is that good enough?
No, probably not good enough.
Okay.
No, that's a good question. Yeah, probably there's still room.
Yeah. But your time's up.